Welcome into NFL on 365 Sports. I'm your host, Grayson Grundhoefer, and today we are continuing our draft recaps, continuing to go through every single team and how they did during their draft. Today, we're talking about the Los Angeles Chargers, so stay tuned. All right, y'all, welcome in. I'm really excited to talk about the Los Angeles Chargers today, mainly because this is a team that is truly contending to try to win a Super Bowl. They've built this kind of roster around Justin Herbert. They got a ton of weapons when you think about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, have built a great defense. They added J.C. Jackson this offseason to kind of anchor that cornerback position. So they're just continuing to build. And, I mean, it's just keep up when you're talking about trying to figure out ways to win in the AFC. It's an absolute just juggernaut of teams in the AFC now, and the Chargers are kind of at the forefront of a team that's trying to make that climb to being, instead of the middle road of the AFC, barely making the playoffs, they're trying to be the top team in the conference. So we'll see if they can do that, but they definitely made up some ground when you talk about the NFL draft, and it all started really with their first pick, and it's clear that the Chargers have this mindset that they have to protect Justin Herbert. They have to give him enough time to make throws and go through proper reads, but they also need the ability to run the football. And they were great at it this past year, but I think it could get even better, and they could protect Justin Herbert even better. And so with their first pick at pick 17 in the first round, they went out and got Zion Johnson, the offensive lineman out of Boston College. And this is a guy who's going to start right away at guard. He provides a lot of power. I think he can go up front and be a kind of mauling guard. He's solid in run blocking, great in pass protection. So when you turn on the tape, you're going to see him moving people up front. Boston College really relies on their run game. So if there's one thing you know out of a Boston College offensive lineman, it is that they're going to be able to do things in the run game that at many other schools they're not going to be able to do. And Zion showed it on tape consistently, the ability to get to the second level, block linebackers, create explosive plays for their running game. But on the flip side, the area that I think a lot of people don't really focus on too much, especially from the guard position, is the fact that he only allowed one sack in 2,288 career snaps. That is just fantastic. And when you think about Justin Herbert, you think about a guy who he would prefer to stand in the pocket. Now, can he get outside the pocket and sling it a mile downfield? Absolutely. I mean, his arm talent is off the charts, but when he's able to stand in the pocket and have a clean pocket, that's really where he thrives, and that's where their biggest play weapon on the outside, Mike Williams, really thrives, is when Herbert can really stand in that pocket and just really laser focus in on Mike Williams down the sideline. And it's really worked for them a whole lot during their careers, and now they've added another guy to build around that. And Zion Johnson is a perfect fit. He continues this mindset of, hey, you know what? We went out and got all these defensive guys this offseason through free agency. Now let's continue to get Justin Herbert help. And they did that in round one. Was really impressed by that pick. And I think it shows a lot of foresight. You know, a lot of guys, when you go to the NFL at the quarterback position, they take a lot of hits their first few years because frankly, you're going to a bad team who probably doesn't have a good offensive line, and it can ruin careers. I mean, Andrew Luck is the perfect example of that. And so now the Chargers are saying, we're not going to allow Justin Herbert to take those kind of hits. We're going to continue to build an offensive line in front of him. So kudos to them for that first pick. Moving on to round 3, pick 79, JT Woods, the safety out of Baylor. This is one of those picks where I think you really have to turn on the tape to really see the areas that he impacts the game. And I think the biggest thing for him is his speed, his range, and then his ability to force turnovers. And that was a consistent theme during his time at Baylor. Just continued to force interceptions after interceptions, had 5 this past year, was just terrific, picked up fumbles, forced fumbles. He really just exemplified a guy of a ball hawk, a guy who's going to make plays in the secondary. And for this Chargers team, you know, Derwin James has been banged up a whole lot. And so relying on him is kind of tough, even though when he's right, he's one of the best safeties in the league. But you pair him with a JT Woods, a guy who you have a lot of trust in is going to be able to make plays on the back end and have the speed necessary to force pass breakups on the backside while making explosive plays for your defense. So this was a good pick and one where you look at the Chargers defense from a year ago and you go, okay, they were the number 29th ranked defense in the NFL. And I don't think a lot of people kind of saw that or knew that. They gave up 27 points per game. And when you're asking your offense to score 28 points a game to win games, that's not a great recipe for success. And we saw that in the playoffs as a lot of these high-powered offenses were scoring 17 points or 20 points and having to find ways to win. And for a lot of these teams that didn't invest on defense, it really impacted them in the playoffs. So kudos to the Chargers again for this pick. They focused on the defense. They were able to go out and get a guy who I really think can help their secondary. And they already did a lot of this during free agency, but going into the draft and finding a guy like JT Woods this late in the draft, I think complements their free agent pickups really, really well. Moving on to round 4, pick 123, another faller in this draft, and it's Isaiah Spiller, the running back out of Texas A&M. He fell a long way. And I'm not saying it was really surprising, but I don't think anyone would have been stunned if he went in round 3 or maybe even the back end of round 2. But right now, running back's value is just continues to downgrade. And Spiller is a good running back, a good all-around running back, but he doesn't do anything great. Like when you turn on the tape, you don't see a guy that's running by a lot of people consistently or breaking a ton of tackles or really showing flashes of elite play, but he's good at everything. You know, I think that's a compliment to his game as well. He can catch passes. He runs hard. He's fast enough. And when you look at kind of what he did, it's hard to argue with the production, right? I mean, he led the SEC, if you count his last 3 years, with nearly 3,000 yards rushing, including 1,800 yards after contact, which also led the SEC. Now, he had a great offensive line in front of him. He had an offense that really focused on running the football, but it still takes a good running back to put up those kind of numbers in the SEC. So I like the pickup. I think that he's one who could come in and beat out Josh Kelly right away and Larry Roundtree right away. And the Chargers didn't re-sign Justin Jackson, who in my opinion was the second best running back there from a year ago. So now Spiller's in a situation where if Austin Eckler gets injured, which, knock on wood, but it has happened very often during his career in the NFL, then I think Spiller's a guy who could come in and take over a lion's share of the workload, if not all of the workload. I think he's that kind of running back. He's capable of it. And I think they saw a clear need to upgrade. It just has been weird for the Chargers because they continue to draft a running back every single year. It was Jackson, and then Kelly, and then Roundtree, and they just continue to draft and take shots on backup running backs. But now I think they might have found their guy. I think Spiller's probably better than the other two guys on the roster. As far as kind of other picks they had, they drafted on the defensive line. They went out, got an offensive guard, a fullback, and Xander Horvath, which is kind of funny, a Purdue guy who played running back for them as well. So he gives them kind of a little bit more of a power back. So I'm really intrigued by if he makes the roster. I think he'll help on the special teams as well. They got a cornerback out of Wake Forest, Jasir Taylor. But I really like Jamari Sawyer, the offensive lineman out of Georgia, another big-bodied prospect who could play tackle, right tackle specifically, but I do think he'll end up at guard. But he does have a lot of upside, and obviously he was on a championship team a year ago, so very good player and a guy who I think could develop into a starting right tackle at some point for the Chargers, but again, likely a guard in the long run. Overall, the Chargers had a first-round draft pick, and then they didn't have a second-round pick, so it's really hard to give them anything more than a B. My grade for them is kind of based on the fact that they addressed their needs, but it wasn't a whole lot of splashy picks. They didn't go out and get a ton of guys that I feel like will come in and be, all-pro type guys. I think Zion Johnson will be a nice rotational piece. I think he'll start for them, but I don't think he's going to be an all-pro right off the bat. So I think a B is pretty fair for their draft class. They addressed their needs. They got better as a team. And again, they gave Justin Herbert even more help going into next season. So that's it for the Chargers. I'll be continuing these draft recaps throughout the week and the coming weeks as we try to go through every single football team in the NFL, talk about their draft class, what I liked, what I didn't like, and just kind of see where things fall as the season just continues to feel like it's approaching quicker and quicker. So for Grayson Grundhoefer, this has been NFL on 365 Sports.